is the Neubauer Family Distinguished Service Professor of Entrepreneurship and Finance at Chicago Booth. He's an expert in private equity, venture capital, and corporate finance, and he serves on the boards of several companies. Panel, welcome back to The Big Question. Steve Kaplan, are chief executives overpaid?
So it's a very complicated question. As you mentioned earlier, CEOs are paid a lot, and they're paid a lot relative to the typical person. And there's this perception that they're overpaid. I think part of the reason they have this perception is that, if you read the press, pay keeps going up and up and up and up, and CEOs are never disciplined. And as you said, in fact, pay for the S&P 500 CEOs has gone down by almost 40%, or roughly 40% since 2000. So there are misconceptions that are pretty marked in this area. So now the question is, are they overpaid? I think there are two ways to look at that. One is whether it's fair, and that's where it's a judgment call. It depends on your political perspective or many things, and I think some of that is where this perception comes from. But what I looked at, and the question I asked is are CEOs paid more than their market value? And when you look at it that way, it's actually hard to see that they're overpaid. And let me give you a few examples. First of all, if you look at what CEOs are paid relative to other people at the top, so let's say the top 0.1%, the CEOs at the S&P 500 companies are about where they were 15, 20 years ago relative to the top 0.1%, meaning their pay hasn't gone up by any more than other people who've done well. Lawyers, for example, you look at law partners who are business people or who are doing things related to business, their pay has gone up by about the same amount as S&P 500 CEOs. If you look at CEOs and executives of private companies, so these are companies where they're probably being run by either a family or large shareholders, the pay of executives in private companies appears to have gone up by more than the pay of public company CEOs. So if you look at...
What do we learn from that?
Well, what we learn from that is that if you worry that public company CEOs are somehow overpaid because they're taking advantage of their boards, you have to ask, why are they paid? Why is their pay gone up by less than private company CEOs where their boards are either themselves or large shareholders? So there's no way for them to be taking advantage of an agency problem or of the fact that it's other people's money. They're getting paid from either their money or shareholders' money, and their pay has gone up by more than the public company CEOs. The other thing that's very interesting, if you look at CEO pay at the S&P 500 to net income of the companies, that ratio is the lowest it's been in 20 years. It's actually gone down since 1993. So the CEOs are taking a smaller percentage of the annual income of their companies. So you look at it on all those dimensions, and again, from a market perspective, it's hard to see today that they're overpaid. And one other thing I'll mention, since Dodd-Frank, we've had to have a say on pay vote every year.
The overall of U.S. financial regulation.
The overall of U.S. financial regulation, in there, it required a shareholder vote that was advisory on the pay of top executives in U.S. companies. And we're now in our third year of that. And in every year, at least 97% of the companies have gotten a favorable vote. And in fact, you see commentators, liberal commentators, who are very upset that the say on pay rule hasn't worked. Everybody's getting approved. And my response is, well, there was not a big problem in the first place, so of course they're getting approved.
It has worked.
And that evidence, well, there was no problem for it to address, or it wasn't a big problem to address.